"That's my seat," the black single dad said as he pulled the actress close, and the billionaire rose to greet him. Before we dive into this incredible story, take a moment to let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love knowing how far these stories of hope can travel. The wind was a living thing in the small town of Havenwood, a bitter predator that clawed at the thin glass of the all-night diner. Outside, the world had been erased by a blizzard, streetlights haloed and indistinct in the swirling white. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. For Elias Washington, it was the only refuge he could afford. He sat in a cracked vinyl booth, his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, asleep beside him, her small head resting on his thigh. Her worn teddy bear, Patches, was clutched in her hand, one of its button eyes missing. Elias watched the last of his money sit on the table. 2 crumpled dollar bills and a handful of change, just enough for a bowl of soup and a cup of coffee to keep the chill from his bones. It wasn't a meal. It was rent for the booth, a temporary stay against the storm raging both outside and within his own heart. The eviction notice was a folded, menacing square in his pocket. Its words burned into his memory. 72 hours. That was 2 days ago. Tomorrow he and Lily would have nowhere to go. His hands, calloused from years of work at the lumber mill that had shut down 6 months prior, trembled slightly as he wrapped them around the warm mug. He was a good man. He worked hard. He loved his daughter with a fierceness that was the only real warmth in his life, and he never asked for anything he hadn't earned. But the world had a way of forgetting men like him. In Havenwood, he was just another shadow, a single black father in a town that saw him but didn't truly see him. The bell above the diner door chimed, a tinny, cheerful sound that was instantly swallowed by a blast of Arctic air. A woman stumbled in, cloaked in snow. She was not from Havenwood. Her coat was thin, fashionable but useless against the storm's fury, and her face was pale with cold, her eyes wide and lost. She shook snow from her dark hair, her gaze sweeping the nearly empty diner. A couple of truckers at the counter, a tired-looking waitress, and Elias and Lily in the corner. She approached the counter, her voice a fragile whisper. "Excuse me, my car. It broke down just outside of town. My phone is dead. Is there a mechanic? A hotel?" The waitress, a woman named Marge with a permanently sour expression, barely looked up from her crossword puzzle. "Mechanics closed. Storm. Hotels full up. Storm." The woman's shoulders slumped. Is there anywhere I can wait it out?" Marge gestured vaguely with her pen. "We close in an hour." The woman looked at the menu with an unreadable expression, then glanced at her purse. A flicker of shame crossed her features. Elias knew that look. It was the hollow ache of pride colliding with absolute necessity. He saw her shiver, not just from the cold that still clung to her, but from a deeper, more profound chill. He looked down at Lily, sleeping so peacefully, unaware of the cliff's edge they were perched on. He looked at the soup he had ordered for them to share, steam rising from it like a prayer. It was their only meal until he didn't know when. His stomach growled in protest. His mind screamed at him, a chorus of self-preservation. "You can't. You have nothing. She is not your problem." But his heart, the stubborn, foolish muscle that had been taught kindness by his mother and fortified by his love for Lily, beat a different rhythm. He saw not a stranger, but a soul in the same storm as him. He slid out of the booth, his movements gentle so as not to wake his daughter. He walked over to the woman, who was now hugging herself by the door, clearly preparing to brave the blizzard again. "Ma'am," he said softly. His voice was deep and steady, a contradiction to the tremor in his hands. She turned, her eyes startled. They were a striking shade of violet, rimmed with exhaustion. "Yes, please," Elias said, gesturing toward his booth. "Take our seat. There's soup. It's warm. My daughter and I were just about to leave." It was a lie, a terrible and necessary one. They had nowhere to go but a cold, dark apartment they would soon be locked out of. The woman stared at him, then at the steaming bowl of soup, then at the sleeping child. I can't. That's yours. We're finished, he insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. It's no good letting it go to waste. Please. You look like you need it more than we do. A conflict raged in her eyes, suspicion, gratitude, and a profound weariness. Finally, the weariness won. She gave a small, defeated nod. Thank you. Elias guided her to the booth, and she slid in opposite Lily. Marge watched the exchange with a cynical sniff, but said nothing. The woman wrapped her frozen fingers around the warm bowl, her gaze fixed on the sleeping child. She's beautiful, the woman whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She's my whole world, Elias replied, his heart aching. He stood there for a moment, a guardian watching over this strange, impromptu family. He had just given away their last meal. He had chosen compassion over survival. He felt both a fool and more himself than he had in months. The woman, whose name he would later learn was Serafina, ate the soup slowly, as if savoring every drop of warmth and nourishment. Elias stood by the jukebox, pretending to read the song titles, giving her space. He could feel the weight of his empty pockets, the ticking clock of their impending homelessness. He had done the right thing, he knew, but right things didn't pay rent. Right things didn't fill an empty stomach. What's her name? Serafina asked, her voice stronger now. Elias turned back. Lily. And the bear. She smiled faintly, a genuine warmth that transformed her tired face. That's Patches. He's been with her through everything, and he's seen better days, just like us, Elias thought. They spoke for a while, their conversation a small island of humanity in the sterile diner. He told her about the mill closing, about raising Lily on his own since his wife passed away a few years back. He spoke not with self-pity, but with a quiet, unyielding dignity. She, in turn, spoke vaguely of running away from a life that had become a gilded cage, of wanting to find something real again. She never mentioned a name or a profession. To Elias, she was just a woman named Sarah, lost in a storm. He didn't pry. He simply listened, offering the rare gift of his full attention. He saw the way she looked at Lily, with a longing that spoke of her own hidden sorrows. Their fragile peace was shattered when the diner door opened again, this time admitting a man who seemed to carry the storm's chill inside him. It was Mr. Gable, the owner of their apartment building and half the other struggling properties in Havenwood. He was a man whose heart had long been foreclosed on. His eyes, small and sharp, scanned the diner and landed on Elias with predatory satisfaction. Washington, Gable's voice cut through the quiet hum of the diner. Fancy seeing you here. Spending money you owe me, are we? Elias felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. He stood taller, trying to shield Lily from the man's toxic presence. Mr. Gable, we were just getting out of the storm. The storm's coming for you tomorrow morning, Washington, Gable sneered, loud enough for the truckers and Marge to hear. He took a step closer, his gaze sweeping over their booth with contempt. 9 a.m. The sheriff will be there to escort you and your things out. I hope you enjoyed your soup. It's the last hot meal you'll have under my roof. Every word was a public blow. Elias could feel the other patrons' eyes on him, their pity and judgment a physical weight. He clenched his fists at his sides, his knuckles white. He wanted to rage, to defend his honor, but what was the point? The man was speaking the truth, however cruelly. He was failing. In front of his daughter, in front of the stranger, he was being exposed as a complete and utter failure. Serafina watched the exchange, her violet eyes turning hard as ice. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, protective fury. She started to speak, but Elias subtly shook his head. This was his burden, his shame to bear. Gable smirked, satisfied with the humiliation he had caused. Don't be late, he said, before turning and leaving, the bell on the door mocking his exit. The silence he left behind was heavier than the storm. Elias couldn't look at Serafina. He gently scooped the still sleeping Lily into his arms, her warmth a small comfort against the cavernous cold that had opened inside him. Patches the bear was tucked safely under her arm. "We have to go," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Where will you go?" Serafina asked, her voice laced with a desperate concern that felt achingly real. "I'll figure something out," he lied again. "I always do." As he reached the door, she stood up and grabbed his arm. "Wait, her car," she explained, had been a rental. Her wallet and phone were inside, but she had a small emergency card in her coat pocket. She pressed a sleek, black metallic card into his hand. It was featureless except for a single, embossed silver crest and a phone number. "It's for a friend," she said, her eyes boring into his. "An old friend. He helps people. He'll know what to do. Please call him. For your daughter's sake." Just then, the headlights of a rugged-looking tow truck cut through the snow. "That's my ride," she said with relief. "He'll take me to the next city." She scribbled something on a napkin. Another number. "This is mine. Let me know you're okay." She squeezed his arm one last time, her gaze lingering on Lily. "You are a good man, Elias Washington. The world just hasn't caught up yet." Then she was gone, disappearing into the white maelstrom, leaving Elias with a strange, useless-looking card and a shame so deep it felt like it might swallow him whole. The walk back to the apartment was a brutal battle against the wind. Inside, the radiator hissed a final, dying breath and fell silent. The cold was immediate and absolute. Elias tucked Lily into her bed, piling every blanket they owned on top of her. He sat at their small kitchen table, the eviction notice and the black card side by side. Hope was a dangerous, extravagant thing he could no longer afford. Calling a stranger based on the word of another stranger felt like the act of a drowning man grasping at a reflection. But as he looked at Lily's small, trusting face, he knew he had to try. He used the last of his phone's battery to dial the number on the card. It rang once. A man with a voice like polished granite answered. "Finch." Elias hesitated. "Hello? My name is Elias Washington. A woman named Sarah gave me this number. She said you help people." There was a pause. "Where are you?" The voice was calm, authoritative. Elias gave his address. "Stay there. Don't go anywhere. Help is on the way." The line went dead. Elias stared at the phone. "Help is on the way." Sounded like a line from a movie. He didn't believe it, not really. He spent the rest of the night packing their few belongings into cardboard boxes, his movements slow and methodical, a funeral procession for the life they were leaving behind. He packed a chipped photo of his wife, her smile a painful memory of warmer days. He packed Lily's crayon drawings. He packed Patches, tucking the bear carefully into a box of clothes. By dawn, the apartment was bare, their life contained in a few sad stacks by the door. 9 a.m. was approaching like an executioner. Then, through the snow-muffled silence of the morning, came a new sound. Not the grumble of the sheriff's cruiser, but the purr of powerful engines. Elias looked out the window. Lined up on his forgotten street was a fleet of 3 immaculate black sedans, their dark paint stark against the snow. A man in a tailored overcoat emerged from the lead car. He was tall, imposing, with silver hair and an air of absolute command. This was the man from the phone. This was Finch. He didn't come to the door. He simply stood by his car, speaking into his phone, his gaze fixed on the apartment building. Minutes later, Elias's phone, which he'd managed to charge for a few minutes using a neighbor's outlet, rang. It was the man, Finch. "Mr. Washington, my name is Alistair Finch. I trust you are ready." "Ready for what?" Elias asked, his heart pounding. "The sheriff is coming." "The sheriff has been asked to stand down," Finch said calmly, "as has Mr. Gable. It seems there has been a change of ownership regarding your building. Now, if you and your daughter would be so kind as to join me. My sister is waiting." "Sister." The word clicked into place. "Serafina." Dazed, Elias woke Lily, dressed her, and carried her downstairs. The entire neighborhood, it seemed, was peering through their curtains. Mr. Gable was there, standing in the snow, his face a mask of disbelief and rage as he argued with a man in a suit who simply shook his head and handed him a document. As Elias walked past, Gable looked at him with pure hatred. Elias met his gaze and, for the first time, felt no fear. Finch opened the car door for them. The interior was warm, smelling of rich leather. "The diner, I believe," Finch said to the driver. "Miss Vance is fond of their soup." When they walked back into the all-night diner, it was a different world. The place was bustling. The men in suits who had come with Finch were occupying several booths. And in the corner booth, their corner booth, sat Serafina Vance. She looked different now. Her hair and makeup were perfect. She wore an elegant cashmere sweater. She was no longer just Sarah, a woman lost in a storm. She was Serafina Vance, the world-famous actress. Her face one Elias now recognized from a dozen movie posters. She was talking quietly with her brother, Alistair Finch, one of the wealthiest and most reclusive billionaires on the planet. Marge the waitress was fawning over them, her sour face replaced with a sycophantic grin. Mr. Gable was there too, standing near the counter, his face pale and sweating. He saw Elias and his face contorted in a sneer born of habit and confusion. "What are you doing here, Washington?" Gable spat, taking a step forward. "I told you to get out. This is a private." "He is with me." Serafina's voice rang out, clear and strong. She stood up, her violet eyes flashing. Every head in the diner turned. Elias, holding Lily's small hand, walked toward them. He felt as if he were moving through a dream. He stopped at the booth. Finch, the billionaire, the man who could buy and sell this entire town 100 times over, looked at him. And this is when Elias Washington, a man with nothing to his name but his dignity, looked at the empty space beside the famous actress and said the words that would change his life forever. "That's my seat." He didn't say it with arrogance, but with a simple statement of fact. It was his place, earned not with money, but with a bowl of soup. He pulled Serafina close in a gentle, protective hug, a gesture between two friends who had shared a moment of grace in a storm. And Alistair Finch, the billionaire, smiled a genuine, warm smile and rose to his feet. "Mr. Washington," Finch said, extending a hand. "It is an honor," he gestured to the seat. "Please." Elias sat down, pulling Lily onto his lap. Gable stood frozen, his jaw hanging open. "Mr. Gable," Finch said, his voice dropping to a temperature colder than the blizzard outside. "My associates have just informed me that the purchase of this building, along with the 4 other properties you own in this town, has been finalized. Your business practices, I've learned, are appalling. You will be compensated fairly, but you are no longer welcome on these premises." He paused. "Effective immediately, Mr. Washington is the new property manager. His first order of business, I believe, will be to renegotiate the leases for all tenants at a fair and equitable rate." Gable sputtered, speechless. Finch wasn't finished. He turned back to Elias. "Serafina told me what you did. In a world that has given you every reason to be selfish, you chose to be kind. My sister, she has been surrounded by people who want something from her for her entire life. You wanted nothing. You gave her everything you had. Such integrity cannot go unrewarded." He slid a portfolio across the table. "Your debts are cleared. This building is yours, free and clear. The deed is inside. I have also established a trust for Lily's education that will see her through any university she chooses. And finally, I am in need of a man with your character to oversee the charitable arm of my foundation in this region. The salary is significant. The work, I believe, you will find rewarding." Elias stared at the portfolio, at the faces of Serafina and Alistair, at his daughter, who was now happily coloring on a napkin Serafina had given her. The weight of years of struggle, of quiet desperation, lifted from his shoulders so suddenly he felt dizzy. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and cleansing. He had not been forgotten. He had been seen. The news spread through Havenwood like wildfire. Elias Washington, the man everyone had pitied, was now the man who owned the block. He was the man who had been honored by a billionaire. He didn't change. He offered Gable a job as a dishwasher, An offer Gable, humbled and broken, accepted. He lowered the rent for his new tenants. He used his position to help the other families who had been left behind when the mill closed. Months later, the snow had melted, replaced by the green blush of spring. The all-night diner was no longer dim and desperate. It was bright and clean, renamed Lily's Place, and it was the heart of the town. Elias ran it not as an owner but as a caretaker. It was a place where no one would ever be turned away for lack of funds. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, the bell chimed. Serafina and Alistair walked in, no longer saviors but family. They slid into the corner booth, where Alistair began a serious game of tic-tac-toe with Lily, and Serafina smiled at Elias. "You see," she whispered, her eyes shining, "I told you the world would catch up." Elias looked around at the full, happy diner, at his daughter's bright laughter, at the new family he had found in the middle of a storm. He knew then that kindness wasn't a transaction. It was a seed. You plant it in the barren soil of another's need, with no expectation of a harvest. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it grows into a forest. This story is a powerful reminder that the true measure of a person's wealth is not what they have, but what they give away. If you were touched by Elias's story, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who needs a little hope today.